Welcome to Security Highlights Podcast, brought to you by DornerWorks. I'm your host, Nathanael Dick, and today we have a special guest with us. Please welcome Greg Hatcher, an expert in cybersecurity from White Knight Labs. Greg, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Nathaniel. It's a pleasure to be here.
So to start off, let's talk about some of those recent updates to the FDA cybersecurity requirements for medical devices. Could you describe in general what those updates entail and how they impact the implementation of product security?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about like the bottom line up front. The FDA is now finally empowered to secure medical devices and other healthcare IoT before it goes to market, whereas opposed to they used to have to do it after market. So the timeline of this is December 29th of 2022. The 1.7 trillion omnibus package is signed into law. It's actually called like the Ensuring Cybersecurity of Medical Devices Act. So then flash forward to March of this year, the FDA announces that amendments of the Omnibus Act will go into effect in 90 days, or roughly 3 months later. So the 10,000-foot view of the legislation states that they will reject submissions that fail to meet the cybersecurity guidance. So what is the cybersecurity guidance? Basically, if you want to bring a medical device to market and it's going to connect to the internet or have an API, talk to the cloud, anything that is cyber related, it needs to one, like actually have thorough security testing, like a penetration test, firmware analysis, and then there also has to be a machine readable SBOM with it as well. So
So lots of extra requirements. How does
yep.
those FDA cybersecurity requirements then affect, say, building it at all parts of the medical device, even early stages of development?
Well,
What should we start thinking about with these new guidance?
well, before this act was passed, or this amendment, I should say, security could be an afterthought when you're making, like, say, a pacemaker or an insulin pump or something. But
Sure.
now companies now know that they have to meet these guidelines at the end, so they might as well push security left. They're going to have to now. So if they build a product that doesn't have security in mind, it's probably not going to make it through the FDA. I don't know, the FDA gates, if you will.
Sure, that makes sense. And so you talk about shifting left. Can you describe a little bit more what you mean by shifting left in cybersecurity?
Absolutely. You're analyzing all of the third-party components that are going to be in your software. You're doing static source code review while you're actually building the code, as opposed to, like compiling the binary and then doing
Sure.
source code analysis on the back half. So you're building security into the SDLC by pushing a left and thinking about it sort of holistically as you're making this product. You're doing threat modeling before you even do anything. So say you're making an insulin pump that has an API that talks to, like, a mobile application or the cloud. Like, what are the pieces of that can be attacked? What are like the most likely avenues? Um, yeah, looking for things like, are we hard coding credentials to the API into the source code? Do we have like passwords in the strings? Like, if I run strings against the binary, am I going to find hard code credentials? Things like that.
Yeah, definitely. In the importance of that, like you talk about insulin pumps. Wow, if we don't secure those devices, we're in trouble, not only from the FDA cybersecurity guidance, but just in general. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the technical aspects. Can you explain? We already mentioned SBOM. What is an SBOM and kind of what's the different types of SBOMs out there too?
Yeah, absolutely. So an SBOM is essentially it's like there's seven components of an SBOM. There's the supplier name, there's the component name, the version number, there's other unique identifiers, the dependency relationship, there's the author of the SBOM data itself, and then there's the timestamp. So think of an SBOM like if I was building a house and it would
Sure.
have windows and doors and a floor and a roof. Like every piece of that, think of the house as like a binary. Every piece of those things, you would have a list of them. That would be like the SBOM for a house. It would be like, okay,
Like your
the
supply list.
yep, absolutely. So the door came from this
Yeah.
manufacturer, like the tree that made the door was cut in this forest, like really getting into the details of where the software came from. So this was actually pushed down from the Biden administration in May of 2021, I believe. Um, they made an address called like the like ensuring the nation's cybersecurity, and it's basically said an SBOM, their response to all the supply chain attacks was saying that like suppliers will now have SBOMs for all their products. That
And
way,
so,
like
yeah,
yes,
so that kind of helps with what identifying, say, if a supplier has some vulnerabilities.
yeah, absolutely. So like I think the best example is Log4j. When the Log4j vulnerability came out, a lot of companies were like, huh, I,
Yeah.
are we using that in any of our things? Yes,
Right.
yes, you probably are. So an SBOM solves that problem, especially if you're using a third-party tool like JFrog or something like that, where you have all the like your SBOMs are all automated and you can just search through like, hey, are we using Log4j in our tech stack anywhere? And it can find it.
That's
So
really important.
yeah,
Yeah.
it allows companies to like find, fix, and finish like critical vulnerabilities immediately.
So it's really highlighting the need to have your supply list. Like you talked about that house. We got to know what we're putting into the house in the
Yeah,
same.
what's in the house, man?
Right. Yeah. What's in the house? Yeah.
We got a
And
leaky
so,
roof.
exactly. What if those shingles have a warranty? What if there's a device like Log4j that has a vulnerability? How do we identify that? Thank you for
Yep.
clarifying that. So another aspect that you mentioned is that vulnerability scanning. So could you shed some light on a little bit maybe what vulnerability scanning is and how it affects building security into products?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think most people listening to this podcast are very familiar with vulnerability scanning on a network. So this is me running
Yep.
a tool like Nessus or Qualys or Nexpose or something, and they're basically looking at like the service or the process that's running, and they're getting the version of it. Is it outdated? Does it have vulnerabilities? And they're giving like a CVSS for that. Vulnerability scanning for IoT products is a little bit different because there's more components. It's more like a system of systems. So you actually have to vuln scan each of those, like the system within the system, to see if those products are outdated. This is where the SBOM comes into play again. So especially if the SBOM is machine readable, you could just feed that binary into a system like Nessus or something. It gets spit out vulnerabilities for each of the third party libraries or components within the tool.
Sure.
Um,
So having like a ability to check that basically supply list and see where are the vulnerabilities based on the version and based on that
yep.
supply list that was supplied. Okay. And then so like further digging into that penetration testing, you kind of talked about that. How does that play into like say we have a medical product or a embedded device? What is its role of like having a third party penetration test that device to make sure it really has a robust security built into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So even, companies give their best effort to secure the products
Right.
most of the time. But when White Knight Labs performs a penetration test on an embedded device, well, there's multiple steps to this. Like we're going to check for device tampering assessment. So if I break into the device and is there going to be an anti-tamper mechanism? Because there probably should be.
Right.
We're going to do firmware analysis, which includes emulation testing. We're going to dump the firmware and we're going to use a tool like binwalk to look through it. We're going to run strings against the binary looking for hard-coded credentials. Um, Nowadays there's things that like almost everything connects to like some kind of mobile app, so you have to include that in the threat model as well, right? Like if I include the mobile app, can I get to the pacemaker or the insulin
Yeah.
pump or fill in the blank with thing that can kill you? So there's that piece as well. So there's also static and dynamic code review. So at One Net Labs, we actually like to pair our dynamic testing while looking at the source code because you can find deeper bugs. We don't
Sure.
ever want to return a report to a client that's like, well, we did the static source code analysis and this might be a SQL injection. Like that's not okay. No one
Yeah.
cares about your hypothetical vulnerability, right?
Right.
Um, and then there's also the protocol analysis. We'll actually look at Wireshark. We'll look at the traffic of the embedded device on the wire to see what's doing. See if we can tamper with that.
Oh yeah.
Um,
And that is so important too to have that third party verify it and in the aspect of the device manufacturer is working on the device and then having somebody else check it is really important, just a critical in any cybersecurity real best practice too.
yeah, absolutely. Is the data encrypted at rest? Is it encrypted
Yep.
in transfer? Like, are they using HTTP as opposed to HTTPS? In the year 2023, we're probably not going to see that anymore, but maybe 10 years ago.
Well,
Um,
and that's the thing too, we should bring up too, is there's a lot of like legacy medical devices out there. And so
Oh, brother, you're preaching the choir.
they may be using, right, HTTP and say, oh, we'll isolate it on the network. But that sounds like that's something that we're going to have to start getting away from, getting those legacy devices on more common protocols like HTTPS and making sure that traffic is encrypted.
Yeah, it's like it's like this weird inverse relationship between security and like outdated equipment.
Yeah.
Like the more critical the system is, the more likely it is to have been sitting there for 20 years and not have been patched. Healthcare is notorious for this. Any kind of OT environment, factories, um, you know,
Yeah.
like maybe like this, like the company that makes the software that runs the OT, like maybe that they make timber or something, or
Right.
they plane wood, and the company went out of business 10 years ago, and there is no update for the
Yeah.
application, and it has to run on Windows 7 or something, right? I just feel bad for these companies that are kind of backed into a corner, that don't have the money to go, go find that new vendor, completely switch softwares, etc.
Yeah. A lot of it's just expense, right? Just having a large x-ray machine that costs millions of dollars. What's that cost benefit analysis of, yeah, there's security involved. How do we make that cost benefit analysis? And so yeah, it's important that, I think you talked about the threat modeling. Okay, how do we really have a threat model that shows the risks and rewards of cybersecurity too, and make the business case really too, because
Yeah.
ultimately that's going to sell it to any company and any customer that we work with is, hey, we want to show that building this cybersecurity in is actually cost benefit worth it. It may take a while, but it is worth it over the long run.
Absolutely. So, sometimes it's as easy as just turning off the computer.
Yeah.
I used to lead a CISA red team, and we were down in Nevada, and we were doing like mom and pop municipality in the middle of nowhere, and we found Eternal Blue like running on a server 2003,
Oh yeah.
and the sys admin like came into where we were working our room, and he's like, "Oh, that's still on. It's not even
Yeah.
doing anything," and he just turned it off. Like it was gone.
Yeah.
And that was our initial access into the network where we ended up getting DA in like a half hour. But
Wow.
if that box wasn't there, it didn't have Eternal Blue, we couldn't have pivoted. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Your security is only as good as that weakest link in the network, and yeah, the role of like IT playing into even these devices on the network. It's true in a general IT infrastructure, and it's even more true in, say, a hospital environment where there's lots of guests coming into a hospital environment. There's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of things going on, and having those endpoints secured is even more important.
Absolutely.
So kind of getting into, we talked a little bit at some of those misconceptions. I think one of the things that, is there any common misconceptions that you found or miss about medical device cybersecurity? And how do you address those as they come up versus maybe something else, like some different type of medical device cybersecurity?
um, I think that oftentimes the person that's using the embedded medical device that connects to the internet isn't aware of the security risks, because no one has taught them. Like the doctor's not going to tell you that there's a risk that your insulin pump can be attacked or your pacemaker could be bricked or something.
Yeah.
So it's just having this awareness. And I think the FDA pushing these new guidelines for like the required security testing of medical devices is gonna highlight and just kind of make security ubiquitous across this field. Um, yeah, I would say it's the awareness that
Sure.
people don't know how big the attack surface is on this device that may be inside of you that is connecting to the internet.
Yeah. And as we continue to be increasingly connected, making sure we really isolate those risks, we make sure that we secure them. It's a sobering reminder of so many of the risks we face. It's good that we're talking about this, bringing light to it. Greg, do you have any? This has been a great discussion. Any final thoughts as we close out this discussion?
Um, yeah, I just want to point out that White Knight Labs does do embedded medical device testing. We have a very deep bench. We have a proven track record of doing this. So if you are looking for a pen test for your embedded medical device, contact me.
That's awesome. White Knight Labs, we've loved working with them, and
Selling
uh,
it.
Yep. And DornerWorks has been a good partner with them, at least as we start some of these discussions, and we continue to also provide expertise in medical device cybersecurity. I think that's the thing to highlight too. There are people that know how to navigate these challenges, and just reach out, whether it's White Knight Labs, whether it's DornerWorks. We want to just highlight that there are people that can walk alongside you and guide you through some of these different challenges of whether it's medical device cybersecurity. This is something that is going to continue to be increasingly something that is important to not only comply with, but make sure we build in cybersecurity into all aspects of development. So thanks so much,
Absolutely.
Greg, for coming and talking about this important topic. And I appreciate bringing some more awareness to this topic as we continue to learn more about it. And the FDA continues to release more guidance. So thanks so
Yeah,
much.
absolutely. And this goes even beyond medical devices too, because,
Yes.
everything connects to the internet now. If you buy a smart fridge, a smart microwave, like smart anything, it can be attacked. So
Yeah,
things to keep
definitely.
in mind.
Yeah, and it's going to continue to expand as we get more connected and as we bring in artificial intelligence to the medical device world too, and we continue to expand that in all the areas that we connect. So, yep.
Yep. Thanks, Nathaniel.
Yeah, thanks, Greg, and thanks everybody for coming out and hearing the podcast, and stay cyber safe out there.